Good evening. Take a seat. My name is Rosemary Burke. I'm president of the Belmont League of Women Voters, and I want to welcome you to Warrant Briefing this evening. If you're new to town meeting, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions for clarification of articles that are going to be on the warrant. And I want to also mention that today is Earth Day, and I hope that everyone here has had an opportunity to think about their own personal carbon footprint on this Earth, and also as we go forward, as we get into the business of town meeting in Belmont, we could also think about the town's carbon footprint here on Earth and consider that. I want to welcome Jim Hyam, who is on the Warrant Committee, and he will be walking us through the articles of the warrant. Jim?
First, there are a few administrative matters that will should be said at the beginning. As you can see, this meeting is being recorded, and for anybody who's falling asleep at home, it will be rebroadcast Friday at 7:30, Saturday at 9:30, Sunday at 8:30, and Monday at 5:30 p.m. And it can also be reached on Belmont Media's website. I rather doubt that too many people will watch it, but I wanted to include that. Now, as to how we will proceed tonight, we will go through the articles in the order they are in the warrant. Jeff will flash up either the article itself or a description thereof, and that will help people who did not bring their copy of the warrant. Now, I'm told that some people got either incomplete copies of the warrant, or only every other page. This is a way of speeding up town meeting. However, if anybody does not have a warrant or has an incomplete copy, there is a pile here sitting in the front row on my immediate left, and you're certainly welcome to take one if you want one. Okay, now to having gotten rid of these one more housekeeping matter. If you have a question, the camera has asked that you go to the microphone, which is in the middle of the aisle directly in front of me. This means that your voice will be recorded forever on the tape. Now, one other thing I probably should mention, this is meant to be an information meeting. We're not here to argue the merits of particular articles. So if anybody really gets into an argument, I will unfortunately have to ask them to cease. So if you're just planning to practice your speech for town meeting, please don't do it here. Okay, having said that much, we will now proceed to Article 1. Jeff? This is the standard article in which reports are delivered, and it would be the first article normally at the town meeting. I think anybody who's been a town meeting member recognizes this is just a standard article and does nothing more than allow the selectmen and probably others to deliver reports. Do we have any questions on this article? Article 2. Article 2 is the article which authorizes the selectmen to control the town's legal affairs. They can bring suits, they can defend suits, and they can hire town council. This, again, is an absolutely standard article, and I would doubt there are questions, but are there any? Seeing none, we're making great progress. Article 3. Now, this for those of you who've been town meeting members for a while, is also a standard article. It's just transferring balances from which we voted in last year, and transferring them into where they're actually being used. Again, it's a regular article. Jennifer?
It may be a regular article, Mr. Hyam, but I still have a question.
Okay.
I guess experience doesn't count for much when reading these things. I'm confused about, let me see, about the third item down, the $20,000 from the cemetery perpetual care income, the program 350 cemetery maintenance. The thing that confused me was when I got to Article 13. So for people who have copies of their warrant may want to look at that. When I got to Article 13, I thought, wait a minute, haven't I seen something like this earlier? Article 13 says that there may be, and hereby is transferred a sum of $530,000 in sale of cemetery lots to the cemetery perpetual care fund. And yet we're taking $20,000 from the cemetery perpetual care fund for maintenance. And it just struck me as kind of curious.
I think I know the answer, but fortunately there's somebody who knows it better than I do, to wit our town accountant, who's seated right beside you.
Hello, Barbara.
We actually sell cemetery lots. Can you hear me?
This is only for the taping, it's not for amplifying.
We sell cemetery lots, and we have the sale of the cemetery lots to pay for the cemetery itself. We built a new cemetery in the Highlands. The other half is going to go into what they call perpetual care. It's a trust fund that is, they keep the principal intact, and the interest is used to take care of the maintenance on the cemetery. So this particular article takes the interest from that cemetery trust fund to be used for the maintenance of the cemetery. The other article transfers the funds from something that is not earning interest, which is the sale of, in effect, land, but it's cemetery lots, to the trust fund that does earn interest.
I think they're separating the income from interest.
One is an income, that's right, and 13
And the other income from sales. Got it, thank you.
Any further questions on this article? Well, moving on, we're now to Article 4, which is the budget appropriations. If any of you have, Jeff has outlined it pretty well here, but if you have your copy of the proposed motions, it gives a little more detail. But it's, as most of you would know, this is broken down into the standard categories, and we vote each category as it comes up. Now, do we have any questions? All of these are subject to amendment.
May I ask a question about that?
Would go to the microphone, please.
You-
Well, you're doing well, Jennifer. I mean,
Well, when you say all of these are subject to amendment, do you mean that before town meeting, some of these numbers might be changed, or do you mean that at town meeting they can be changed?
no, the moderator is here, but my understanding is that the amendment would have to be filed 3 days before town meeting.
Right, so when you say these are all subject to amendment, you mean through that process?
Through that process, yes. Well, we're making great. We'll go on to Article 5. This is a mandatory article. The salaries of elected officials have to be set by town meeting. Every other salary is set either by collective bargaining or by the town, by higher officials' salaries are set by the selectman and town administrator. Do we have questions?
This is basic date. I wanted to ask, on the actual warrant for the town clerk, it says $84,299. But on the screen and on the preliminary motion, it says $80,697.
Well, that's a very fair question, and I and the Warrant Committee am largely responsible for the change. The reason is that the two full-time officials who are elected present a slightly different problem. They don't fit into the standard categories. And what happened was that we had set up a system by which we established a range of pay for town clerks and town treasurers by taking a census of neighboring towns. And from that, we established a rough midpoint of salaries. And what we've done is, if the person is below the midpoint, they, and this year, get 4% to approach the midpoint and a standard 4% increase. And that is what happened to the treasurer. In the case of the clerk, she had previously reached the midpoint, so all we recommended for her was the standard 4% raise. This is essentially the same system that is used for the town's higher officials, non-union officials. But because of the state statute, the elected official salaries have to be set by town meeting. This particular one got to town meeting, and the Warrant Committee's recommendation is as set forth in the warrant itself. That is, for the clerk, $80,697.
So it's what's in the preliminary motion, not in the warrant.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. You corrected me. Thank you. Yes. Dolores, I'm afraid you've been the victim of this.
I'm Dolores Keefe, and I am the town clerk. And this has been an ongoing problem with me and the Warrant Committee. And I'd like to correct Mr. Hyam. I have not and did not reach the midpoint. He has been insistent that I had. I had asked to see what survey they did. I have yet to see it. The new survey that came out with what's going to be coming out next year, the midpoint is at 83,000. Now, I've been in the position 10 years now. I haven't reached midpoint yet. And I just feel that everyone should know what's been going on. I have not met with my subcommittee other than Mr. Hyam. I did ask to meet with the full subcommittee. It never happened. It's only he and I who have been dealing. And I just feel town meetings should know all of this. And he's told me I've been overpaid and have been overpaid. Now, I've been there since 7:15 this morning, all day, had a caucus, and here I am. And that's usually how it is. I'm not complaining about the salary. I'm complaining about the process. And how come they could lower mine in the motions, but they didn't change the town treasurer's? That's not his salary that you see in the motions from what I'm hearing. And I really just think that I have the same supervisory power and responsibilities as a department head. I am not listed as a department head. I am not on the salary of the department heads. I am responsible as the election officer for all elections, for all vital statistics, all records that are kept in the town. And during my 10 years, I have kept the census as up to date. In 2000, the previous town clerk and I handled that federal census, which was quite a project. I am not doing it this year. Also, I've tried very hard to meet all of you and the rest of the residents of Belmont with efficiency and diligency and certainly integrity. I pride myself on the fact that I do try to treat each of you the same way. And also, as soon as passports became available for town clerks to do, I jumped on that. And we're not making a lot of money, but we are taking the time to help citizens facilitate their passports. And I think, for the most part, I've been well received by the town citizens and the residents, and I don't take the town clerk's job as a feather in the hat, you might say. I take it because I enjoy it, and I enjoy the people. But I feel better. I wanted to get that out about this battle that's been going on and what I call inequality.
Well, thank you, Dolores. I think you should be allowed to state your side of it, and I certainly mean no criticism whatsoever of your efforts or the long hours you keep or your efficiency. But we did use the same formula we have used before, and for better or for worse, we apparently came out with somewhat different results than you did as to where the midpoint is. And
That's what I'm asking you people for 4 years almost.
you didn't mention it, well, I don't, but anyhow, the warrant committee recommendation is the 80,000 plus shown, and that's what will be before the town meeting. Anybody else on these salaries? Let's move on. This is actually quite a standard article, and let's see. Would the retirement people be glad be nice enough to describe it to the town, to the meeting?
I'm Marion Cote, and I'm the administrator of the retirement system. This one person has is a non-contrib, as we call it, non-contributory retirement. And we have one retiree left, and it's an elderly person. And when that person passes on, that will be the end of this article in this appropriation.
It's my understanding, Marion, that he was employed before the contributory system went in.
That's right.
And therefore, we have to deal with him separately from everyone else.
That's correct.
Well, we wish him a long life.
Yes.
Thank you. Article 7. This is the great bulk of the pension money. In fact, it's everybody else except the one gentleman we just discussed. It's in effect mandatory. It is our contribution to the pensions of the persons who have retired, other than the one that's already been discussed. Article 8. This, again, is a standard article to appropriate monies for the improvement of highways. Do we have questions regarding that?
This is one that is only in, we're setting aside the money that we have to pay up front before we get a reimbursement.
That's
Is that correct? So it has nothing to do with how much money is put into the budget for other kinds of highway projects,
That's correct.
and it has nothing to do with the possible override.
That is also correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Jennifer, for clarifying that. I probably went a little too glib in just saying it's a standard article. Basically, we have to do it because of a state grant.
Which number is correct?
401 is the correct number. I believe 401 is correct. Well, Mrs. Bruce says it's correct, and
401 is correct.
and she's never forgotten anything, so. Okay, we're now on to Article 9. This actually is a standard article, but people may have questions about it. Basically, what it does is it puts jobs other than elected officials, and I think the town administrator is also not included. It puts jobs into categories where each job is assigned a category running from something like 1 to 16, and there's a range of pay for each of those each of those grades, and raises and so forth are fairly automatic up to the midpoint. But then, at least in the higher officials, there is some consideration by the selectmen of how well they're doing. So the I have a feeling the administrator of these things is hiding, but, oh, there you are. Would you have anything you wanted to add?
I'd be happy to. Basically, this is just a framework, a structure for the town to have a hierarchy of job classifications. It was set up by an outside consultant through a proprietary, what they call point factor system. So the jobs are ranked in order of importance, and it protects the town from discrimination suits. So you'll see, I don't know if it's been sent to you yet, but you will be getting a copy of what this year's, the FY09 plan is. And you'll see there's two parts to this plan. The first is the framework, or the ranking of jobs, ranking order of jobs, again, done by an outside consultant. And then the attached pay ranges that go with that. So that's basically what it is. It doesn't set pays per se by individual employee. You're merely voting on the structure that's been set up, again, to keep the town from getting involved with any discrimination suits.
Do you have any of those here? Do you
What?
have any of these?
I brought copies myself. I don't
Do
know
they
if any have been distributed yet.
No, they didn't go with the warrants.
So if you'd like, I can pass them out. It's up to you.
I got one, but I don't know in what mailing.
They are available on the town's website, and we do intend to have copies available the night of town meeting for anyone who wants them.
Yes, I do. Yeah. Mr. Heim, if you'd like me to pass them out, I'd be happy to do that now. Yes, I brought.
Well, it'd be very helpful if you would, yes. Yeah, if you. Yes, sir.
The COLA
Could you give your name, please?
David Chase, Precinct 3. The cost of living adjustment, is that measured or estimated or negotiated? And I guess she's busy with that.
You'll get a better answer from the expert than from me.
Is the COLA, is that measured from the previous year or estimated, or is it negotiated?
Okay, let me see if I can answer that for you. The COLA that you see on there, I would say about 90% of the positions. Oh, all right. In the private sector, I think COLA is a cost of living adjustment. We like to refer to it as a general wage increase in the public sector because the employees only get the one raise. In some private sector places, that's an additional on top of a general wage increase. We don't do that in the public sector. So this is a general wage increase, and basically with the 90% or plus of the employees are unionized in the town, and that's all been bargained, and those contracts were approved and started last year. So we know that this is going to be the amount given to the employees that are unionized in the upcoming year. So we use that, the practice in the town for many, many years, before I got here even, was that you apply that for internal equity, that same general wage increase to the non-union ranges. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to get that amount because we have performance reviews and et cetera. But the ranges, to keep the pay portions of the plan equitable, the ranges, or the football field, so to speak, all moves at the same amount.
But I was just curious if this was supposed to be, if that was a negotiated figure or if it was actually intended to track current actual inflation.
It's negotiated.
So we can't move it.
The question was, is that 3.5 something that has been negotiated? And as I mentioned, over 90% of our employees are unionized, and yes, that was the negotiated figure for next year for those wages.
Sir, in back, behind you.
Go away. David Webster, Precinct 4. Just to understand, so what you've done is you've established for the first time 22 job steps, basically, with salaries associated with them. Was part of this work also then somebody assigned, like recreation director, to step 16? Was that part of the work as well? 16, yes. Is it possible to know, well, that's kind of important because what they're making now is someplace within that salary scale. Yes. And since the salary scales kind of overlap, right, then, you know, if you put somebody in kind of towards the top of the scale or the bottom of the scale, it might have consequences as far as the budget down the road. Was that was all part of the process, though? Do you know? Yeah, okay.
Well,
right.
sir, this is nothing new. This system has been in effect for a number of years.
You've had 23 classifications of jobs? And
yes.
Each job with a certain classification on it?
Occasionally a classification of a given job is changed, but the basic system has been with us for at least as long as you've been here, I think.
Yeah, it was put together about, I want to say, completed about 6 years ago, about a year before I got here. And it was just, it was done by a new consultant because every 10 to 15 years you need to have this looked at again. And so that was when it was done the last time. And keep in mind, what we're asking at town meeting is just the vote on this classification plan, which gives a grade to the various jobs, and then the pay plan that's attached to it. We're not asking for votes on individual people's salaries that are in different places within those ranges. You're correct.
But we're voting on this position goes with this number, this next range.
Yes, and the pay structure that goes with it.
Well, we're establishing a range, sir, but actually the great majority of these are settled by union negotiations anyway. And at least as long as the town has money, and probably contractually binding on the town. Anything further on this article? Article 10. Oh, we have the chairman of the Capital Budget Committee. This is the capital budget. If you have the motions, it is broken down in your handout. Otherwise, Jeff has done an excellent job of summarizing it on his slide. And Mrs. Bishop.
I'm Carolyn Bishop, Precinct 1. I just have a question, and I'm not sure which article it would be related to, so forgive me if I'm on the wrong article. Since I noticed that we have had to shut down several street lights per certain streets to save money, I wondered if there's some way that we can find out what it costs to light the field, the track at the high school when there are not games, just for people to walk. because it currently seems to be lit whether it's pouring rain or snowing or whether it's been plowed or not. It's just lit. And it seems as though that might be a place where we could save some money.
I confess to abysmal ignorance, but Peter is here, and
The
would you
light,
just identify yourself, Peter, for the
Peter Castanino, Director of Public Works. The lighting for the track, the walking track, running track, and the synthetic field as well is on 1 meter. It's about $3,100 a year. I looked at that today, actually, and I think the games that are actually played is about 6, where you have the full lights on. There are I think there are 4 banks of lights with 16 lights in each bank. For the full field, it's about 6% a year. The balance is walking lights. So I would estimate if we turned off the walking lights, it'd save about $2,500 a year. As to lights being on, we make an effort to turn off the lights when they're not always usable. That's not always possible because the weather changes and things happen, such as you get heavy rain when it's not expected. But we do try to. The lights are actually monitored from a site in some far western state through the school department athletic office. We can turn them only completely off, which we try to do when there's bad weather.
Thank you, Mr. Castellino. Mr. Staton?
Thank you, Jim Staton, Town Meeting Member for Precinct 1. I just observed that the report for the Capital Budget Committee is one of the best civic documents I've read in a long, long time. I'm curious as to, was there a primary author?
Well, I will say this. The Capital Budget Committee report in past years was written by me and then by you, and the present author has done a better job than either of us did. I now introduce the present author.
No, I'm not. Actually, Mark Clark is. So Mark Clark is the one that gets all the credit for it.
That was my suspicion. I'm glad to have it confirmed. And I would suggest that any of you who have not read this, be sure you do from beginning to end. And it's also, I think, such a fine document that we really ought to consider sending it out to every household in the town. It spells out exactly what we're up against and how we're approaching the capital expenditure problems in town.
I think we can all safely conclude it is much better than the ones Hyam used to write, and somewhat better than the ones Staton used to write. Mrs. Burke.
Yeah, Rosemary Burke, Precinct 2. For the vehicles that are being replaced, are any of those hybrids?
I'm told the answer is no.
And why not?
Oh, Tom? If you...
Good evening, Tom Younger, Town Administrator. Part of the issue is the ones we're replacing there, the hybrids that we've replaced, let's say in the light department, they're hybrids, are basically passenger-type vehicles. These are not passenger vehicles. We have not, at least in my tenure here, replaced passenger vehicles on the general government side. In fact, we've been phasing them out. In fact, my former vehicle has been phased out when I came on board here, so these are not regular passenger vehicles.
Mrs. Burke?
I'm just wondering, what is the fire replace staff vehicle? What is that? Under departmental equipment, fire replace staff vehicle, $44,000.
That's the shift commander vehicle. That is basically like a 4x4 type vehicle. It's not a passenger vehicle.
This is, if you two want to fight, fine.
Well, I guess for purposes of clarification, I would like to know what is it about this vehicle that requires it to be a 4x4 and not something along a hybrid nature? where in the world around us, many hybrids are used, not 4x4s, for shift command. It is not to my understanding, it is not an apparatus that would be engaged in fighting a fire or of that nature. It says here, staff vehicle. For clarification, could it be explained why that could not be a hybrid?
I'll try that one, Rosemary. We actually asked the question of the fire chief, and he's away this week, school vacation week. He'll be at town meeting Monday night, so he can answer it then. But the basic answer was this is not a staff vehicle, i.e. that it just gets the chief to a fire, but it actually acts as the emergency command center at an incident. So it has a heavier duty and a heavier requirement, and they have looked at hybrids, and the experience of fire departments with the hybrids for this particular use has not been good, according to our fire chief. But I would prefer that he directly answer the question, if that would be okay on Monday night.
Mrs. Staten?
Turns out I do have two questions. One is, what is it is virtualized back-end service under computer equipment?
I admit to ignorance.
Would you like an educated guess?
Yes.
What they're doing? If someone said that to me, I would assume that they were consolidating several small computers as virtual servers like VMware does on your laptop on a large computer. So one computer acting as if it were several small computers. So consolidating equipment. That's my guess.
Okay, I'll take that. Unless-
Actually, this is phase two.
Mike, if you would.
This is actually phase two. The school department had completed their version of it last year, and this is the second portion of the project.
But it is.
It is,
what he
yes,
described.
what David had said, yes.
Okay, thank you. And the second one is what are Vactor? What's a Vactor? Is that a misprint for a tractor?
Peter? Thank you.
Excuse me. A Vactor is actually a trade name. It's a piece of equipment that's a high-pressure flushing machine to clean pipes, as well as a vacuum machine. Literally, it's a gigantic vacuum that can vacuum debris out of a manhole, out of a trench. And the trade name is Vactor. There are other companies that make similar machines, but its trade name in the industry is they're all called Vactors.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who was next in line?
Jan Cruz, Precinct 3. Jan Cruz, Precinct 3. I have a question on the vehicles that are being purchased, as well as future vehicles in the capital budget for further down the road. It's my understanding that there is a policy that we should be purchasing the most fuel-efficient vehicle for the purpose, and I was wondering if anybody had looked at that for these particular vehicles.
Yes, thank you, Jan. We have looked at them for those vehicles, and as Pat had said earlier, particularly for the fire vehicles and the public safety vehicles, there are certain models that they make that are primarily for that type of purpose. The dump trucks for both cemetery and highway, Peter Castillo is very concerned with the rising cost of fuel and such and energy, and he does look at those vehicles for those particular purposes, but you are limited to a certain degree based on dump trucks and the type of capabilities.
Jennifer?
Still on this question of the vehicles, I think it's too bad if we view vehicles as either hybrids or non-hybrids. I think that Jan was onto something important in talking about whether the town is truly committed to getting the most energy-efficient vehicles, and often those are not hybrids, particularly in these larger classes. So I would suggest that in the future, it might be useful, for example, as an article to the paper or in some kind of communication to town meeting members, to know how many different vehicles of a particular class were considered and what their mileage is, so that we would be reassured that we are actually committing ourselves to buying the most energy efficient vehicles. It's a way for the town to save money as well as save the planet. But I think that to just say, oh yeah, of course we do that, is, I'd like to know more about how it is that that is done, and I suspect other members of town meeting would too.
I see the appropriate people taking notes. Anything more on Article 10?
It's Donald Mercier, Precinct 8. You know, one thing that's not brought up in this discussion of efficiency of vehicles is the miles the vehicle is driven per year as it relates to depreciation of the vehicle, which is one of your costs. If you drive a vehicle very few miles a year, which is a lot of this is around town, you might lose money by paying a premium for a vehicle. And just because a vehicle is energy efficient on the road doesn't mean it's inefficient. It's efficient in its manufacturing process, i.e. the manufacturing of the batteries and all that extra equipment that involves. And it's also, there's a lot more pieces of equipment on there to be maintained. It's just not the fuel cost. It's a total package you have to look at from the natural resources to the end use, which a lot of these discussions do not get involved with. They only talk about the end use, the gas efficiency. The first thing right off the top is the depreciation of that vehicle if it never moves.
Thank you, Mr. Mercier. Again, I see notes being taken. Anything further on Article 10? Oh.
I don't see a number besides school building envelope. Is that on my paper? Is that a misprint? Oh, I see. Well, you mean it's Burbank front entrance flag, that stuff? Okay, thank you. On the copy, the subcategories are on the next page, so it's not clear.
Well,
On the printed copy.
thank you for catching that. Article 11. This is another standard article, and the money to satisfy it comes entirely from sewer and water fees. It is not a tax article. Those fees are basically controlled by the selectmen in their capacity as light and water commissioners. Any questions? Yes. Oh. You're filling many roles tonight.
Not asking a question. Jeff Conti, Assistant Town Administrator. I just want to sort of head this off at the pass because I know that at least one of our eagle-eyed town meeting members will catch this. There is a typo in the motions that you received in the mail. On the very first line of the first motion of Article 11, the sum that is listed is printed as $4,964,163, and it's actually supposed to be $4,964,193, as indicated on the slide that you see in front of you. So I apologize. The typo is entirely my fault.
Anything other than that correction? Article 12. This involves revolving funds. As I think most people now know, these are funds which are set up to exist from year to year. Some people, like, for instance, the Recreation Department, which happens to have its big time during the summer, could hardly function if it was suddenly cut off from money on June 30th. So, well, but that, I'm corrected. But these are funds set up so that department's operations are basically not restricted by the strict financial year that does control most town appropriations. Any questions?
Yes, Jennifer Page, Precinct 3. Did I understand you to say that the Recreation Department is one of the ones that...
No, that was my error.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to ask, where's the Recreation Department?
No,
And the answer is they don't do that.
That's my error. It's an error of memory. This first arose in connection with that department, but it was found that didn't work with them. I apologize. And that's a much worse error than the one Jeff confessed to. Article 12. No, that was, sorry. Article 13, sorry.
Can I speak on 12?
Yes, sure.
Donald Mercier, Precinct 8. These expenditure limits, I'm not quite sure how these work. Did we fund this once and these just giving them
Excuse
back?
me?
Giving them back the same money every year? In other words, as an example, the art gallery, we're giving expenditure limits is $15,000. I don't understand what is that for and how is it done?
These are limits on expenditure. Jeff will give you more detail, but these basically are limits on the size of these funds.
Sure, happy to try to explain this. There's no money being appropriated here. The amounts that are contained in these funds come in from fees that are collected by the various departments. For example, the library collects a fee if somebody loses a book that they borrow. These funds are set up to hold those amounts so that they can be expended by the same department as opposed to having to go back into the general fund and be appropriated all over again. What this article actually does is it sets a ceiling on the amount that can be held in the fund at any one time. So those are the amounts that you see before you. These amounts, none of them has been raised since last year. In fact, I think I decreased one or two of them. But we're just trying to reflect how much money we realistically expect the departments to collect. There's no need for the funds to be any bigger than that.
Thank you, Mr. Conti. Anything further on this article? Hearing on Article 13. I think this has already been pretty well covered from after Mrs. Price's question, but maybe there are other people who want to comment. Hearing none, Article 14. The description in the warrant pretty well summarizes this article. What we have is proceeds from the sale of the Harvard Lawn Fire Station, and since we have no way of applying it to a fire station, that money would be used to reduce the bonded indebtedness on the new senior center. Yes, Mr. Mercier.
Donald Mercier, Precinct 8. Don't we have a bond out for the fire stations that have to be reduced also?
I think the answer is in the description, which it is technically impossible to apply this money to an already outstanding partially paid bond on the fire station.
Okay, so we don't have any choice. We cannot reduce that bond by the...
This is the best way we can use it. It has to go to some bonded project.
Okay, then let's talk about a very big deficiency we have, which are the roads. $615,000 would do quite a job on some roads that we need
I believe I'm correct. I believe I'm correct in my law that this has to go to a bonded project, and the roads are not bonded.
What about the
They
schools?
perhaps should be, but
But what about the schools?
the only school that's being paid off at present is the present middle school. Again, to do the technical job of inserting the money into a existing bond issue is extremely difficult. It is much easier technically to put it to a new issue which has not yet been made.
Okay, that's what my question was. So we don't have a bond at this time on that construction project?
That is correct.
We're
So
going to
what-
reduce the bond, we're going to reduce the bond we're going to be asking for by $615,000.
Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Messier. Anything else on Article 14? Article 15. Mr. Mercier?
On this section about no person shall permit a tree or branch or hedge or whatnot to grow onto basically the public areas and streets. My understanding of the real estate law, when that tree limb comes over onto your property, which in this case is the town can do what they want to with that piece extending, and I don't think it's the responsibility of the property owner to go out in the public area to be cutting that limb off. And I question how you can even enforce that part of it.
Peter? Mr. Castellino?
Does this also cover the area where people are throwing snow on the public roads? That I think you can stop, because it's, but not necessarily the trees and bushes.
Mr. Castellino?
Maybe I can expand a bit. The section that Mr. Mercier is talking about actually is an existing section of the bylaw. It's nothing new. It's been in the bylaws for as long as I've been around. What the article seeks to do is change some sections of the bylaw. Certainly not, that's not the section we're changing. That's been around. We have used and enforced that by when people have trees and many times shrubs that extend out over the sidewalks. We quote the bylaw and ask them to trim them back, which in many times works. I think there's also a provision in the bylaw where we can trim them back and charge them for them, which we generally seek not to do. The intention of the bylaw change is to really create or allow us to create a street opening permit system. We have one that's really not clearly identified in the town bylaws as the selectmen having the authority to create and enforce one. So really, if you look at that section, it kind of blends in, adds to some existing bylaws to give the selectmen the authority to create regulations and enforce them. And basically, as this says, it's for street and trench opening as well as occupying the street. For example, if someone was to put a scaffolding up in front of a new commercial building and blocking the sidewalk, there's currently no provision that they have to take a permit out on the public sidewalk to do that. If a dumpster was dropped off in the street for a week, there's a health department regulation, but no permit to occupy the street regulation, as well as there was a new law from the state starting in January 1st of 2009. It is a trench opening permit, which requires anybody that opens a trench deeper than 3 feet, whether it's on, well, let me distinguish first. The street opening is on public ways only. Trench opening is different in the sense that the new law from the state requires towns to issue permits for any trench deeper than 3 feet on any public or private property in town. And that goes back to a tragedy in 1999 where a little girl down in Bridgewater was tragically killed. A contractor dug a trench actually in her backyard and had left, and she went into the trench and the trench collapsed and she died. That trench opening permit requires contractors or anyone that digs a trench to secure the trench and make it safe at all times. But that's really the intent of this bylaw change. There's a lot of stuff in there that was already existed prior to this.
Any further questions? I might add that when I first started practicing law 50-odd years ago, almost the first problem I was given was, can you cut your neighbor's branches away if his tree comes over your property? As far as I know, the answer is still yes. Moving on, Article 16. The slide doesn't mention it, but as I understand it, this loan would be a 0% interest rate. And the repayment would, as we, I think, all expect, be from sewer use fees. Any questions? Hearing none, Article 17. This is pretty much the same thing, except in this case, the interest rate is 2%. Yes, yes, sir.
Just permission to
Yeah, would you, for the benefit of anybody who may be watching on television?
Is this a motion just to allow permission to apply to this program, or is there a specific amount that's being applied for in a specific project?
Mr. Jones?
The town submitted an application to the Clean Water SRF last year for this amount, and the Clean Water SRF fund included this amount in its intended use plan for the coming year. And what needs to happen next is that we need to go back to the state with our designs, specific designs and cost estimates for each project that are listed in the second paragraph. And then after appropriate evaluation of that, then the loan fund would start those funds being paid toward those projects.
Well, as collision, gentleman with the cap first.
Thank you. Kevin Cunningham, Precinct 4.
Could you keep your voice up, sir?
Sure. Just a point of information. I'm interested in knowing how does the pipe, how does this fit into a long-term plan about the sewer systems, and how does the sewer system improvements relate to the roads? Because of the construction and stuff like that. If anyone could just speak to that, the overall plan.
Thank you.
Yes, the overall plan for the sewers contains several parts. There are 3 different projects in the second paragraph. The first part is relining existing pipes, and that is being done in those parts of town where monitoring of receiving water shows that we have leaking sanitary sewer pipes that are leaking into our stormwater system and then into receiving waters. And we've already identified an area in the Wellington Brook through some monitoring of people here in town that has that problem. And so that first part of that is to deal with the relining to prevent that leaking. The third part is the sewage pumping stations. We have 2 pumping stations up on the hill that pump sanitary sewer waste up, and then so it goes back down by gravity feed. They're very old, about 50 years, is that right? Old. They're not easy to maintain, and by replacing them now, we're not only getting better pumps that are more easy to maintain because they've already come to the end of their useful life, but they're also more energy efficient than the pumps that did exist there. The third part is going to be work on a project having to do with Windbrook flooding, and the proposal for that came back from the engineers is still being evaluated. Basically, what's going to happen in the final analysis is that there will be some part of those funds that will be spent on reducing inflow into the sanitary sewer system at higher elevations that comes down and floods Winbrook. Right now, our inflow amounts are 24 million gallons per day. In a heavy rain event, we've got to start getting some control on those illegal connections that contribute to that. And if that doesn't resolve all the flooding problems, there will be some new construction of some new pipes around Winbrook to divert some of the water coming down around the Winbrook area and then over into the interceptor sewer on Flanders Road. The question about the roads is a good one. There will be work done on sewers if the roads projects, any road project that goes forward will allow the town to make point repairs on sewers when they're being excavated. You can see problems and fix them right then. All of those fixes are being paid for out of either operating income or transfers from the retained earnings.
I'm not sure I like this comment that being 50 is being very old, but otherwise, thank you. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Mark D'Andrea, Precinct 3. I see the words up there that the money will be repaid from sewer receipts. Now, I would like to know if there's enough money coming in from current sewer receipts to cover this, and if not, can someone give us a scenario of how we can expect sewer receipt charges to people who pay for water, how that's going to increase over the years, so we can get some idea of how much extra money people are going to have to pay for water and sewer bills over the next few years.
Mr. Jones?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. It's Ralph Jones. I'm chairman of the Sewer and Storm Drain Committee. I'm also a member of Town Meeting Precinct 2 and now also a selectman. But to address the question, the loan repayments under this program do not begin until all of the construction is done. So they will not be factored into the sewer budget for FY09, but they will, in theory, begin, or FY010, FY11. We have a forward-looking capital plan and budget going out 6 years right now, and it looks as if, and this is highly contingent upon what the MWRA charges us for our sewer, but it looks as if going out, if we have a steady increase of approximately 5% per year in the sewer rates and also are able to use retained earnings, we can maintain a fairly steady increase in those rates. There won't be any spike, and we can cover the full debt service on that loan.